Check Podcasts.
The Bread and Butter Collective is a collection of hospitality professionals working together to help strengthen our industry to build strong culture, community, and sustainability.
I'm Calen McNeil.
And I'm Sam Jones. And this is the Bread and Butter Podcast.
Welcome to the Bread and Butter Podcast. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Calen, we're here again.
We're here again.
Oh, my
It feels
God.
like we just were here.
I know, just like yesterday.
But we're by ourselves today. We don't have a guest.
That's okay. We've
Looking
got
at an empty
ourselves.
chair. We do have ourselves.
We're saving up for the really good guests.
Yes.
I
yeah.
guess.
Well, we got to be we got to work harder and line up the talent.
Well, it's actually a hard thing to do.
Well, people's schedules. It's we do this at 11 on a Wednesday, so.
Oh, great. Now we're going to have throngs of people at the Czech studio hounding us.
Yeah, to get on our show.
Yeah.
No problem. Anytime.
They can start lining up at around 10:30 in the morning. We'll take the first two people in line for our guests.
And we'll just chat.
We'll just chat. Don't care who you are.
It doesn't matter what you come with. We'll find out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll have random guests.
So speaking of random, how was your week? How's life? We haven't had a one-on-one for some time, so
life is good. I feel better about business right now. I got out of a problem that I was in, and that kind of
nice. Do you want to talk about that at all, or can you talk big picture?
Not particular. Yeah, big picture. Feel like I'm moving on from one supplier to another.
Oh, so you did
right now.
do that.
And so that's is about to come full circle. I got all the financial part of that dealt with this week.
Oh, good.
In fact, it's going to end probably tomorrow or today.
Oh, sweet.
And then I have to work on contracts and contractual obligations that I feel obligated to fulfill. Yeah. However, it's not in my best interest to do so.
Right.
And if my supplier doesn't really care because they are not actually holding the product, then I feel like they should just release
you.
Solid and just release me, and just everyone will be happy.
Do you think it's going to happen?
Yeah, I do think it'll happen.
So you've secured your new supplier effectively.
Yep. Yeah. And if that feels really good, I'm really happy with the quality.
Yeah. And are you getting
process.
that product now?
I am.
Yeah. So you just stopped ordering the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Effectively.
Yeah. I'm not going about this in maybe how you should do it, but I'm going about it in the way that I have to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't think I went about this in the way that I would have liked to have gone about it, and I don't feel 100% good about it only because I am trying to get out of an obligation.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think we should talk a little bit about that because I think this happens in business a lot where you start with good intentions and you start the relationship and you're building, and then all of a sudden, the pendulum switches where you're not feeling great about it. There's issues that are coming up. You've made the commitment. You feel like you've got an honor to that commitment, but it isn't in the best interest of your business or your customer.
Right.
So how do you deal with that situation? I think a lot of people's tendencies are to avoid the hard discussion and the hard questions, and that's kind of like the transparency component of it. But having said that, sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. And, I think part of the problem, if you give an indication, I guess that's the fear, is if you give an indication too soon that you're going to move on from a certain relationship, a certain agreement, then you lose a little bit of control because then now they know the information before you've done it.
Right.
And they're either going to try to talk you out of it or stop delivering to you or what have you that could present some risk in your business.
Yeah, and I've thought about that, and I've thought about how I think about it really, and I'm probably overthinking it. I think that it's probably going to be just fine.
Yeah, and
the conversation I'm going to have is probably going to be just fine.
Yeah,
and my supplier, I've known them for years and years and years. It's not the last time I want to buy stuff out of them. I just don't want to be
obligated in
obligation right now because I need the flexibility in my business for my product. And right now my product is banging. It's really good. And I really
is that with the new supplier or the old supplier? Yeah, the new supplier.
With my new supplier.
Yeah.
And I get more options with them.
Yeah.
And I like it. I know I'm not actually hurting my supplier.
Yeah.
It's not like I've got a contract for X amount of product and they buy X amount of product and hold on to it until I buy from them. It's just in their books as what they need to maintain certain par levels.
Yeah.
And they just need to reduce those par levels on my behalf.
Yeah.
And they're not really out of money. They may be out of a plan as to how they're going to.
Well, they're going to have lost future revenue, I guess, from you, but that's what happens when you lose a customer or stop being as competitive.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you're paying everybody, anytime you're in an agreement or a contract with somebody that all of a sudden the pendulum switches and your business can't really make it work, then you need to make the best interest of your business. They've got their own interest as well. But I do think the longer you wait in making those decisions, as hard as they are, and some of them come with penalties, and I guess that's the tricky part. If there isn't penalties built in, then there isn't really no obligation other than your honor or,
which means a lot.
Oh, for sure.
To me,
As
for
it
sure.
should.
But also, I was thinking at first when I was thinking about doing this, I was like, oh man, they could like take me to court. They could do all this stuff. It's like, but they won't.
Of course they won't. I mean, they want to do business with you. And the reality of it is, if it doesn't work for your business, that should not work for them either, because if it's not working for your business long term, your business will fail.
Yeah.
So if you aren't making those hard decisions, right? And that's a very good way to present it to them, is if I stay in this relationship, my business will fail. I need to make a different choice. And the other thing too, I'm involved in a situation where somebody is making a pitch to have me end a relationship with the partner. And they've offered me a big sum of money to do it. And my first instinct is I never look at the money and say, okay, let me just do it for the money, because I feel like there's a duty to the relationship, and the person or the group that we've been in business with have been good to us and they provided us some benefit, and we've done that. But at some point, you can't ignore the benefit to your business, because especially when our margins are so tight, you can't really, you don't have a choice. Your duty to the business should take first precedent.
Right.
Obviously, you have to have your moral code and your integrity attached. And I've said no to this person or this group several times, and it was big money then. But they've come back with bigger money where it's like, okay, now you've got my attention.
Well, without naming names or amounts of money, I know where you're coming from on this, and I would say this situation doesn't have a lot of morals. I mean, I'm glad to see that you're looking at it through a moralistic lens, because you have a commitment. However, I would take this and run, buddy.
Well, no, for sure, it's a no. It is too good to be true, and it is a no-brainer. But I think when you talk about your decision-making tree, and you have to have that code. You
do,
like, because that guides you. Yeah, right? And it's like, okay, how do I want to be treated by the people that I'm doing business with? How do I want my customers to be treated, and how do I want them to treat me? So if on that lens, if I'm analyzing my decision, I need to put it through that filter every time. Otherwise, you're going to get in a situation where you're a sailboat without a mast, right?
Right.
Or without a rudder, because you don't have your guiding principles. And you end up making decisions. Your core values, right,
are not being used to what they need to be used for. To make every decision.
Even though when you first look at it, you're like, "Oh, that's a no-brainer. Just do it." I still think you need to go back to your decision-making tree that aligns with your core values, so that you can know what is the right thing to do here. Because it may not change the decision from being a yes to a no, but it could change the way you deal with the other supplier that you're using, and your duty of care to them, and saying, thank you for all that you've done, and it's been a great relationship, but also giving them an opportunity to match it. I mean, they're both in the same field, they're both, in the same business, competitive. If they want to compete to build market share for themselves, like, who am I to stop that? But I think, too often you get caught up with the money part of it, but forgetting that the discipline of looking at that filter and aligning it with your core values, because that way in 10 years, your business is going to have the same moral fiber and the fabric of your kind of we believe statements. We call them we believe statements,
Okay.
which is kind of our guiding principles of what we do and who we are. Your business ends up over time eroding if you aren't going back to that filter and
Right.
using that same code of ethics in making your decisions.
I was talking to a person this last week. She was having some issues just trying to wrap her head around business and stuff. And one of the first things we talked about was core values and how important they were and how you live and die by them.
Yeah.
And hearing you talking about this decision you have to make, depending on your core values, it's like to get out of that relationship and into a better one might fall right in with your core values as well.
For sure.
Might be perfect.
Might align better.
Yeah.
You know, and those are even when we looked at changing meat suppliers, you know, to a more ethically raised beef, even though the other one was still the same, and they said ethics, this new company was doing these really interesting things. And we paid more for the beef because of it, but it better aligned with our values. So that was the opposite, where you're not just making decisions based on the monetary factor. You're making decisions that are in the best interest of your customer because that's what they want. Your business because it aligns better with your core values. So when we are proponents of, you know, climate action, you know, so why would we use a farmer that isn't looking to do better on, you know, sustainable farming?
Right.
And lowering their emissions and all of those things, because that just aligns with what we're doing. So even though we paid more for it and we took a bit of a hit, you know, it felt good to make that decision. So not every decision is going to be purely financial, but and either way, either for you or against you. But I think every decision needs to go back to that filter of where your core values are and understanding your core value. And that's part of it is some people, you know, have their business core values and then they have their personal core values. For me,
they don't have to be the same.
They don't have to necessarily be the same. Personally, you could make decisions that you wouldn't make in your business and vice versa. But having been in a business, I used to do import products and sell to the big box stores. Having been in that world, I never, ever wanted my personal values to be unaligned with my business values because for me, they're one and the same. You know, if you don't necessarily have, well, you should have your values aligned if you're in a job, you know, with the company you work for. Yeah. Often they don't align. So you're having to do things that don't align with your personal values. And there's a conflict there. I mean, that is a kind of a byproduct of the free market. And you know, not everybody has choices or the fluidity to just say, oh, that doesn't align. I'm going to quit and go work with somebody that does align.
I haven't had a job in so long. I don't even relate to what that means.
No, and I agree.
It's like, but of course, core values have to match up with what you're doing every day.
No, but it's one of those things that I think people think about, and it does create friction in work where you are having, especially if you're going to be, you know, you have the downsides and you have to let somebody go and the person's really good and you know they bring so much value, but you've just got a number on a sheet that you have to look to and then you've got to let them go. Those are black and white. That doesn't necessarily meet with your core values. It may not even be the right decision for the business, but you've been directed to do this by the person that you report to. Yeah. So you do it. So that over time will wear on you because there's not an alignment with your core values, right? And that disconnect.
You don't have as much of a choice if you're an employee.
Yeah, and you don't have a choice. Yeah, you can make a choice of whether you're going to just sever that work relationship or not. In business, when you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot of blurred lines between the business values and your values because you're the entrepreneur. Right. You're making the decisions. You get to decide what values, and you can disconnect. In that old business, I disconnected a lot with my personal values and I said, well, this is just business. So they're going to do this to me, and it forced me to make choices and decisions that I would never make, but I did. And because under the business rules, I was allowed to do it. Right. My personal ethics, I didn't like it, but I did it because it was within the rules. And I knew the people that I was dealing with would have done it 10 times to me and did many times. They chose that versus a personal relationship or what the right thing to do is.
It's hard to make that kind of that separation of business and your personal values.
I think you've got to put it in your decision-making tree again, where you're like, okay, what does this mean and why am I doing this? Both business-wise and personal. And if there's a disconnect between what you do personally, like in your own life versus what you do in your business, that to me is a problem because that erodes your values over time and it changes you. Like when I did that other business, it changed me as a person. And I got out of it specifically, and it cost me money to get out of it. Like, I could have stayed in it and made more money. I got out of it for way less money than I should have or could have, but it was the right decision. And from that moment on, I always made sure my alignment was to my personal values throughout everything. So it guides me to this day. And I would, because I know that feeling so well from before, and this is going back now almost 20 years, like it's probably 17 years since I did that business. But every decision I make, I first go, well, is this aligned with my own values? Am I doing the right thing?
How does that jive when you have partners in business? I mean, from my perspective, I hear what you're saying. And I totally agree that my personal core values, they automatically translate into my business core values.
Because you're making those decisions.
A no-brainer for me. But I also, I don't have partners right now.
Yeah.
So how would you describe having to merge different people's core values into your business's core values?
Well, I think that's
how it works.
No, that is for sure. And I think that is a great question because it does come up. I'm lucky to have the partners I have because they're family.
Yeah.
And I've been in business with them for 25 years. And, we're mostly aligned with our values. Sometimes it's hard because, a lot of the value decisions you have to make, easy decisions are always going to make you more money in the short term, right? So a lot of times you're looking at making decisions that you're like, okay, this is pretty good. It doesn't quite align with our values, but you know what? It's going to mean that we're going to either make more money or be in a better position or better opportunity short term. A lot of the times, the long-term best decisions are always more aligned with what your values are than what maybe the good business decision is. So we get into conflicts or we make decisions and you're like, oh, well, we should just do this. Why don't we take advantage of this opportunity? We're always the ones giving and all this stuff. And firstly, you got to be partnered with people, like-minded people. Right. So immediately you'll know early on in a business partnership if your values align. Because you're going to be coming up, butting your head against the wall.
Kind of hopefully even before you become business partners.
You should.
Knowing, know.
Yeah. And then also part of it too is having that framework. So in your business plan, having a business plan, having your values very clearly stated. And this is not something that we did initially. Like I've always had a business plan, but I never had sort of like our we believe statements or our value statements, which should define who you are in business and then guide you on your decisions as you go through this. And then if you have it at the beginning, you can make sure whatever partner group you're putting together shares those values because that's going to be the values of your business. And that is going to be what connects you to the customer, what helps build your tribe of supporters and promoters, which is going to really fast track your business. If there's a disconnect there, the customers will know. It's no different than, our foundation. And this is one of the examples where, me and my partnership group sort of like bumped heads where it was like literally a hill to die on. And it wasn't that our values were not aligned. It was more about, okay, well, we're going to do this foundation and we're going to do this big, bold move, which was charging our customers it was 1.5%. We've since reduced it to 1%. Because we're raising a significant amount of money, we match that 1%. So when we first talked about that idea, that concept, some of our partnership group, and legitimately, we're saying, well, maybe we have this as a goal down the road, or we look at how that's going to work, or we do it later. And I just said, we need to do it now because the need is now. So in that decision, it wasn't really a business decision because the business decision would probably be to suspend it or put it back just because of how volatile the industry was at the time because we did this, kind of right around in COVID or just after COVID. And that 1% contribution or 1.5% contribution that we were matching on that, is a lot of money, and still is a lot of money as far as, because it's of our revenue, not of our profit. So it was a big, bold move, but it really aligned with my core values, and I knew it aligned with our partners' core values.
Well, just because
business timing.
Yeah, just because it aligns with everyone's core values doesn't mean it's what everyone wants to do in their business.
Totally.
Just because you've got similar core values doesn't mean you always have to do your core values in your business. Like, that can take you in many different directions. You've chosen to do this big, bold move that's backed by your values. It's not a product of your values.
No.
The program is a product of your imagination, backed by your values.
Yeah. I took an edible that I thought was 10 milligrams, but it was 50. And that's where it came. I went down this rabbit hole while I was sleeping, and this is how the idea of it came to fruition.
Okay, so I was talking to Jeff.
Yeah.
And I won't mention his last name. I was talking to him the last couple of days because he called me up going, hey, I'm not drinking beer right now, so I'm on the edible train.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? I'm like, well, I'm a smoker, not a eater, right? So I don't really know, but I'd say 80 to 100 milligrams is what I would take for an edible. He's okay, great. And he went away and he called me back. He's like, so I was talking to some people.
Yeah, no.
He's like, I was doing like 1 or 3 milligrams, and I thought that's too low. That's too low. I'm like, what are you doing?
10 would be the minimum.
Yeah, I'm like, did I move my decimal point the wrong way or something?
Yeah. Well, you can't but if you're chronic, like I know people that are very heavy edible users, and they need 50 to 100 or can, which is like, to me, crazy.
See,
I took a 50 and I was literally like almost curled up crying.
See, I don't even feel edibles, really. I don't think I do.
Well, you're probably not taking enough then, maybe. But whatever. I mean, we're taking a bit of a tangent.
80 to 100 milligrams isn't enough?
It's too much, bro.
Maybe I'm taking too much and it's just passing me right through.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about this later.
I don't know. Food, it's edibles. It fits in the hospitality game.
Yeah, I guess it does. It does. But getting back to what we were talking about, I'm going to keep us focused as much as I can, because the idea of the edibles is pretty attractive too.
I know, right?
But in this situation, there's certain times where it does make sense, because if you're going to do these bold moves, you have to make sure that they're authentic. And in my opinion, the authenticity of it was greatly improved by doing it when the need was there. Right? That's the choice. And I guess when it comes to philanthropy too, a lot of people say, "Oh, when I'm rich or when I'm successful, I will give back." Mm-hmm. And I've always thought that if you believe in giving back, then just give back, because that's the truest form of it, and it's also the most authentic.
It is. And they do say, I mean, when you tithe or give back in any way, you should do it regardless if you feel you can afford to or not. Yeah. Because that's the true spirit of giving or giving. I mean,
it's also a privilege. Right? Like, it's very, this story or this, what we're talking about is a very privileged. You're in a privileged situation if you're able to give and help others, for sure.
You see people who aren't privileged that give back and get so much more out of life as well. And I don't think
I think that's what makes it authentic, right?
Monetary back.
No, you don't. You don't give in order to get back. But I think if you give when you can't necessarily afford to give, it's the purest form.
It's the best giving of all.
Yeah, it's the best giving of all. But in our situation, it's really solidified our business in the community. Mm-hmm. It's solidified our core beliefs. It really defined who we are as a business, because, when you look at business for profit, everybody assumes profit is money and dollar bills, but profit can be the self-actualization of the giving, of being a good employer, of providing, good wages to your staff, a good work environment, and a good value to your customer. Mm-hmm. I see profit there. Like, at the end of the day, in order to survive in a business, you still need to make money. But if your focus is purely the money, you're only going to ever care about money. You're not going to care about the other things because you're going to make all those decisions that are focused on increasing your dollar profit. If you make all the decisions on how to build the best community and best value for the people you're doing business with, it being your employees and your customers primarily and your suppliers to some degree, then that's the real profit. And at the end of the day, that's where the money will come because you're now building this band of people that are on this journey with you. And that to me is what business in this day and age should be.
A band of merry folks.
Yeah. Well, just like we're all here to support each other and support the community. And that is the business model. It doesn't mean you have to you have to forego profit. Like we're a profitable business where we've grown a lot. We've added a couple more stores in the last few years during a tough time in the industry, all those things. But to me, our giving has allowed that to happen.
And you're a B Corp?
We are to B Corp because we would be a B Corp. We do everything that a B Corp does. I'm just not a huge believer. It's sort of like organic. I mean, you know this with organic farming and organic goods. And okay, if you want to be certified organic, you've got to come up with a big chunk of cash that you're going to pay to be audited and certified and be part of get the stamp or whatever.
Not every producer can afford that.
Not every producer can afford it. And it also becomes a disincentive to do the good work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people, as you know, in farming that follow organic principles, but aren't certified organic.
Yeah.
Does that make them, because they're not certified, does that make them any less organic? No.
No. I mean, technically they can't say the word organic or spell it or.
Well, I guess, and these are the things, like you can't make claims that you're organic if you're not certified organic. But I challenge that because if, just like if I say, well, we're a B Corp, so that it's really easy for people to just look up B Corp and see what that means. Right.
You still follow the principles.
Yeah.
Of the B Corp.
Like I've looked at becoming a B Corp and I went through their questionnaire, and this is before we had our foundation. Now that we've got our foundation, like we're far and exceeding B Corp status, which I value that because spreading that knowledge and also creating, taking the people to the water and helping them drink is an important thing. So, and that's one of the reasons why we've got the Bread and Butter Collective, because we're sharing all this information that we've learned over the years or we think is good and showing other members how they can do the same thing if they want. Yeah. It's all choices, but a lot of people are afraid to take that jump because the fear. It's just like becoming carbon neutral. Oh my God, I would love to become carbon neutral. I'd love to say that we're a carbon neutral business and all that, but how do we even do it? And it becomes too daunting, versus just figuring out what you need to do. Okay, well, let's do compost. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's buy EcoStar appliances. Let's, take a survey of our staff to see who bikes versus drives. All those things, and then let's figure out what our emissions are and then let's offset it. So you may not have, audited or certification or whatever, but you can say you offset your carbon. You can make that statement
without the stamp. You pay for.
Yeah, but even the stamp pay for, it's all cheap, but there's barriers to entry, which I think hurts everybody.
Well, with coffee growers, which is what I know.
Yeah.
I don't know anything else, but coffee growers.
No, it's the same philosophy.
It's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, I don't buy certified organic coffee or fair trade coffee because I know the hoops that you have to go through to get those certifications.
Yeah.
And a lot of the good small producers don't understand the process because it's in a different language, and yet they need to hire people to help them go through that process. And they can't afford it anyway.
Yeah.
And if they can't afford that, they probably can't afford the herbicides and the pesticides that they shouldn't be spraying on their farms anyway.
Yeah.
And they usually are the organic small-time farmers that can't afford that certification.
But they're probably doing a lot of the stuff anyways, right?
They are doing it all because they can't afford to do it any other way.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, is what I'm trying to say, right?
That's right. So they're by default doing organic practices.
Yes. Because
but can't afford the processes to get certified.
Right.
Because that requires a sophistication, paperwork, documentation.
Right.
All of this stuff.
That's why there's two of us.
Yeah.
I get the mumbo jumbo ideas and you put it into words and sentences. Makes sense. Thank you.
Well, and I think that's a very good point because, saying, I guess, and that's part of the research too, is like finding out what the core values of the suppliers you're using are too, so that you can align with. And this goes to our switching the beef supplier, and they're more aligned with us without having to be certified carbon neutral or certified, what do you call it? Organic farming or sustainable farm or whatever, like
frog friendly.
Yeah, frog friendly, whatever it is. So they may not have that certification, but if they're doing the practices that are the same or better than the certified people, then fair play to them.
Absolutely.
And I think that in itself is the truer form of it, because as much as these ideas are good, it's just like minimum wage or like living wage, for example. It's great to be living wage certified, but what is living wage for the people that are actually in your circle? So if majority of your customer or employees are living at home, a living wage to them might be $16, $17 an hour.
It's very different,
right? And if majority of your employees are living at home or living with 3 or 4 roommates or whatever, it's not to say that they shouldn't be entitled to living in a place with 1 or 2 other people,
but
or whatever.
Maybe that's not their time of life for that yet.
So,
right?
But you're still paying them $20 an hour. You're paying them more than a living wage for what their costs are.
Sure.
Right. And if you've got the sort of the double income 2-kid kind of scenario where they do need to be making $25 to $30 an hour to be able to afford rents and stuff, then that becomes the living wage for that industry.
Right.
But you can't say you're a living wage employer unless your actual guideline is living wage. So then you got all the barriers around that idea. Like it'd be awesome to say you're living wage employer, but then you're also enriching, you're having to pay a 17 or 16-year-old who's living at home $25 an hour.
Well, and it's awesome to be able to say that you are not for the reason that you get to say it and you get to puff up your chest. Yeah. It's awesome that you get to say you're a living wage employer, or that you're buying certified organic products, or that you're any of those titles.
Yeah.
Because that brings it out into the conversation.
Yeah.
And more people should be buying sustainably harvested products.
Yeah.
More people should be getting jobs where they're getting paid a living wage.
Yeah.
Living wage, not the living wage, but a living wage.
A living wage.
And without having the certifications that some people can achieve, does the conversation really come up as often as it needs to make those real changes happen?
Yeah.
And so,
I see your point.
I think that the only really good reason to have a certification is to increase the public's awareness of the issue that you're trying to tackle. You don't have to have that certification to be a good person in your community, but if you can't tell people what you're doing in a clear, succinct way, they just don't know. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you need to make more awareness of the issues so that other people can jump on board and do the same thing. It kind of gives the issue a name.
Well, it legitimizes it, I guess. But I and I think that it's a very good point, because without these organizations, how is the awareness building? Where the goalposts? I think the auditing process is the necessary one, because you don't want people there saying they're doing something and they're actually not doing it. Mm-hmm. But I also so I think on both sides there's arguments for and against.
Yeah.
And maybe one day we will be a B Corp. I think the B Corp philosophy is a good one, and I think when you institutionalize these policies into your corporate. That's the thing about being a B Corp. You put it into your actual corporate documents. So whoever buys the company, has to follow these. So it survives the life of the company.
Right.
So if you sell or whatever, then it's indoctrinated. These policies are going to be there forever.
Right.
So I think that part is good.
I'm kind of torn, because I see both halves of this equation, and I know how important it is to raise people's consciousnesses about these issues, but at the same time, this year I've decided not to and pull my membership from a group that charges me money to put a sticker on my window.
Yeah.
Which is awareness to the public, and I know it is. So I'm conflicted, and I don't do. I'm not the bastion of what I say I do, I guess.
I know, but the thing about it is, and this is the problem I have with it, and this is the exact crystallizes the point of what we're talking about right now with the idea of doing good versus, just getting a certification of doing good.
Of saying
you are good. So everything comes at a cost. So I was thinking when we were talking about the different things. So if to become a living wage employer, I think right now it's like $25.40 or something. This current, or $24.70 or whatever it is, it's around $25 an hour, right? So in our business, so when you're having someone who, and again, because in this day and age you have to clarify, I don't diminish the work of people that are living at home, but they don't have the same bills as a person living on their own. So if our businesses primarily, say 50% of our businesses are employed by people that live at home or are just starting out in their careers or are young or going to school, all and working on different things, do they need to be making $25 an hour or $30 an hour to do that? So if the answer is yes, then okay, then, because you can't, when you're a living wage employer, there's no middle ground for like a training wage or just hiring.
You can't really ask what your employee's
financial
situation is. Right?
So you're baking in all those higher costs when your margins are so tight. And then you have to wait till the report comes out and see what the living wages are for the next year, or I think maybe they do it every 2 years. So then you're literally like, okay, now everybody gets a $4 an hour increase, and you can't just automatically turn over and charge more for your product like overnight. So then what happens is then you're like, okay, well, let's cut some employees back, so let's operate a little thinner. Let's maybe invest in some technology so we don't need that employee. And then also the bigger thing for me is like, what do we do for investing in our employees' improvement? Like, how do we get them to be managers, and how are we improving their experience working for a company? Especially like for me, it's quick service. So people, I don't expect, because of our policies, we have a lot of people that have been with us a long time, 5 to 10 years. We probably are over average, we'll talk averages, probably I would say we're 50% better than the average company for retaining employees because of how much we pay them and what we do. But I would rather, I'll pay everybody a fair wage, but if the difference between paying them a living wage, which would be $25 an hour, everybody, even if they're living at home or whatever, versus paying them, say, $18 an hour or $19 an hour, but then also having some flexibility to actually train them well and teach them good values and make them a better person for their next job or for their next career or for whatever, then we don't have that wiggle room at $25 an hour, because then all of a sudden now I have to scale back supervision, but I also need a better employee. So there's some employees that could never warrant the productivity of a $25 an hour employee, but we need a body with 2 hands and a heartbeat. So they're not getting hired now because we can't have a business that's sustainable at $25 an hour for every employee. Right. So there needs to be that gap in range, but also flexibility as an employer to do good things for, that are not directly related to how much they take home in their pocket. Right. Like having, a team of people, like we provide our staff, free mental health. So we have a benefits program, but we top it up for mental health. So if somebody needs extra over and above our benefits, we just pay it directly to the counselor or the psychologist or whatever. So that's
You're doing it for me too. This is what we do every Wednesday. You provide
free
mental
counseling.
Health.
So those things all of a sudden start having to get peeled back because something's got to give. Right. Yeah. So there is a lot of tangible benefit that is outside of the hourly wage if you're working for a company or a business that has that ethic. Yeah. Right. So it's a very complex.
And you can't say that you're a living wage employer, even if you are a fair wage employer.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't say you're organic if you're not really. For years, when I had this other cafe on Douglas Street, I had a big wooden sign hanging up right on Douglas Street saying "Certified Orgasmic," and it was about
I love
8 feet tall, right on Douglas Street, and no one noticed it. One person in years came and said, "You know that your sign doesn't say organic; it says orgasmic." I'm like, shh, don't tell anyone. But it was bold,
That's
right? It
was
awesome.
Just like, what a good marketing
orgasmic. And like I said, like I would tell some people, it's not about the name. It's about the idea behind it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. The intent.
Yeah, the intent is
and
that
the execution of
we're
it.
only going to give you clean, wholesome products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting.
The growers are certified organic or not. The coffee's certified orgasmic for sure.
Well, I love that. I might steal that. Certified orgasmic beef.
Right?
I don't know.
Moo.
That might cross the
cross
threshold.
A couple lines.
Yeah, cross a couple of lines for sure.
But that's okay. It's okay to cross lines.
You can always
How
cross
do
some
you know
lines.
that you've crossed them unless you're over the top of them?
Well, and people will tell you.
Oh, yeah, they will.
In this day and age, you'll find out real quick.
Yeah, you'll get canceled.
Yeah, you'll get canceled quick. I mean, recently, getting back to the business of the restaurant, the BC government has announced, because the EHT, employer health tax, that some provinces employ to cover medical costs in our country and our province specifically.
Let's go back where EHT comes from, because EHT started because in BC, before we had free healthcare.
Yeah.
In Canada and in British Columbia, no one had to pay for their healthcare. It was just
there was a fee. If you were in the poverty line, you didn't pay anything, but there was it wasn't a user fee. It was an $80 a month or $60 a month or whatever. So there was, individually, we paid MSP payments.
Oh, but not before MSP came out. Before MSP.
Oh, you're talking back in the day. Now you're going back. Yeah.
Back in the good old days.
The good old days, there was
the government had enough money to be able to cover all our health care.
Yeah.
Then they came out with MSP, which is
medical service plan.
Medical services plan. And I resented having to pay that because I was like, we've never had to pay it before.
Yeah.
Why have the government mismanaged all our money?
Yeah.
And now they can't afford it. Now it's up to the individual to pay for this cost.
Yeah.
Well, enough people complained about that they canceled the MSP and put it on.
But I question the complaint part, because it blindsided me as a business person, because I didn't hear any complaints. Like, truthfully, the MSP program, in my opinion, was working. Everybody had to pay a little something.
Yep.
So everybody had a little skin in the game. You know what I mean?
Well, comparatively, like at the time, it felt like they were gouging by charging everyone.
I guess maybe at the inception, we would have been too young to, because this was the MSP. I don't know when it came out, MSP, the 80s or something?
No, MSP
90s?
was in the late 90s, 2000s.
No.
Because
it was before. I was paying MSP when I was in college. So college was 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I mean, we could Google when it came out.
No, let's just make this up.
I think it was in the early 90s.
Okay.
If not late 80s, that their MSP program rolled out, where people had to pay $60, $80 free if you're below in the poverty line or whatever.
Okay. So by around 2019 or so, they rolled that back and they canceled the MSP program and then
put it on small business.
It to all business, right?
No, not all business. Only businesses that had a payroll of over 500,000 a year.
Right. Okay.
Right. That was the initial, and it was like 1.95% or something. We've got the existing.
Yeah, it was.
So the exemption, you're allowed 500K payroll without paying the tax,
and then after that, it's 2.925%.
That's what is current.
So anything under $500,000, you're exempt. Between 500,000 and 1.5 million, you're at 2.9. So call it 3%. And anything over 1.5 million, you drop down to 1.95%.
So that's on
how
1.5 million. It's $30,000 in tax that you just had to pay. The issue I had when that came out was, especially in the restaurant business. So we were well over that. Like we're over 2 million or 2.5 million in payroll. So we were going to pay no matter what happened. As the owner's salary comes off that, so you don't have to pay it on if you're a principal, but still like we're well over 2.5 million in payroll. So we're at 1.95%. So it ends up working out to 40K. So at the time, even though we were maybe doing 6 million or whatever in sales, we're only making, 200 grand, say, in profit at the end of the year. Like we're at 5%.
So you take 40 grand of that.
Yeah. That's 25% of your equity.
Yeah.
So don't forget, you're also paying tax on the 200, right? Yep. So you're, say 200, say you're paying, you probably pay like 40K or 30K in tax. So your 200, say it's 50K, your 200 becomes 150. And now you're paying $40,000 of that 150 because it comes right off your profit. Yeah. So now you're at 110. So half your profit goes. So now,
and that's between however many owners you have, and that's
but it doesn't even matter because now your net is like 2%. Inflation's 3% or 1.5% or whatever. So you literally can't afford to replace any of your capital.
Right.
Like any of your repairs, any of it goes. So even if you double that, so they're basically now inserted themselves as a equity partner in your business. And if you say you break even, because I mean there's years where you don't make money. So then now you're basically paying this fee, right? And I got into arguments with some people, and there are people I knew, and one in particular owned their own business, and we're like, well, that's part of the thing, and just build it into your costs. I'm just like, it still takes. It's coming directly out of my pocket as the business owner, like directly. It's like the government has just gone in and said, when the way the MSP worked for years, I'm not sure who was complaining about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure people were. Well, I guess, who I mean,
didn't have to pay it before, and now they have to.
$80 a month, whatever. Okay, So now, and I mean, even hearing it, I'm like, I get it. And now, because this has been going on like 2 or 3 years, 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. I don't even know. 2019, I guess.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So 5 years. So we've been paying. It's probably cost us $300,000 or $400,000 over that period of time. 300,000 over that period of time. If it's 50K, so it would be 250, 300K over that particular time. And I love participating, but I was paying $80 a month. Even if you look at all of our, so maybe we were paying $200 a month as an ownership, $2,400 a year. Now it's $50K a year that we're paying, and I don't know. I begrudge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just too.
You should begrudge it.
Yeah, it's just too money. Plus it's coming from the restaurant industry. So the oil and gas sector, for example, or these other high margin businesses who maybe make 15 or 20% a year.
It doesn't really influence them.
No,
much,
like
right?
it's peanuts in that relation as a percentage of their profit. So do it as a percentage of profit or do it as whatever, but don't just take it as a percentage of revenue. Right? Like it's basically a percentage, right? It's actually a percentage of a cost, but it might as well be a percentage of your revenue because, especially in the oil and gas sector, 50% of your revenue goes to wages for people, right? So in the service end of it, mostly. So, you're always going to be over that number. So you're then having to pay, 1.9%, like almost 2%.
Especially if you have to include tips on the wages, right? Because
in the restaurant, I mean it's
which is another tax on an employer.
So they've changed it now. So they've
okay. So
the new proposal is a little better.
For
doesn't affect me.
It doesn't influence you. It still sucks for you.
Yeah.
Because if you're still above 1.5 mil, you're still at that 1.95%. The only change that this helps with is people who are under who are under the $1 million.
Yeah,
mark,
so people that are going 500 to $1 million,
which coincidentally is me. I fall right in between there, and I'm thankful.
So were you paying the HT before?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's gonna save you like $10,000 or something.
Yeah, a little bit more. It's about $800 to $1,000 every month.
Yeah.
That now I don't have to pay that I was paying.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
So for me, it's really good. But then I don't have to look very far to see people who are between 500,000 or between 1 million and 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Those are not big businesses.
Yeah.
And they're being hammered. So their percentage that they need to pay has gone up. So they're now bearing the brunt of this tax. They're now paying, 5.85%.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
Unheard of. And that's going up from 2.9%.
Yeah.
So whoever fits in that little window of 1 million to 1.5 million, they are getting hammered.
Yeah.
And like I said, you don't have to look very far to find an example of a very small business that fits in that category.
Oh my God. Like
It's
a lot of businesses. Like if you're owner occupier of a business, like maybe have a staff of 5 or 6 or 7,
you're under the 500.
You're maybe under the 500.
Yeah.
But if you have a business that has 10 employees more, you're over, most likely, you're over the 500.
Yeah.
Right? So then you're now paying an extra kind of 1.5% or 2%.
You're paying.
You go from 2.9 to
from
almost, it's an extra 2%, basically.
Almost 3 to almost 6.
Yeah.
So it's almost 3.
Almost
it's
3%.
like 2.75% difference or whatever that is.
Which is crazy.
That's a
on
huge increase.
Say on $1 million, that's $30,000.
So we know a pizza place in Victoria that seems to do very well, very popular place.
Yeah.
Think about how I guarantee it's going to hammer them.
Oh, for sure, because they fit right into that window.
Yeah. And
so
it's
then it becomes, well, at what point do you try to grow your business? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
how
where
do you then divide and go, well, I can't have any more employees, so I don't want to open up that other shop.
Yeah.
Because that's going to push me over because I'm going to need 7 more employees.
Well, especially if you only make 5% net.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure, where's the incentive to grow?
It's 3% more on the wage end of it. So say your wages are 30%. So if you're going to go over, like it's a sizable chunk. It's a sizable penalty that you should think about it.
And it is a penalty. And it feels like a penalty.
It's a penalty.
And BC is not the only province in Canada that has this this EHT. Ontario has it as well.
Yeah, what is the Ontario situation?
Well, they do it in what feels like a very graduated, sensible way. Whereas BC, we just talked about it for 10 minutes, and no one knows who's paying what. It's all over the board.
Yeah.
In Ontario, like them or love them or hate them, they do a really graduated. So at the bottom of the scale, up to $200,000, they're paying 0.98%. That gradually goes up. The more your payroll goes up to basically $400,000, where you're paying 1.95%, and then you just keep.
So but if you have if you're a sole proprietor that are paying it, well, hopefully if you own a business, you're paying yourself with dividends, not with a salary, because it's significantly taxed.
Better for you.
Well, it's funny because I have a friend that owns a construction company, and he had an accountant that was telling him that he has to pay himself a salary, a wage. So he basically was taxed at
40 or
whatever the percentage was for 20 years. Ooh. And I was telling him years ago, I'm like, dude, you need a new accountant, because as you're a sole proprietor, you should be paying yourself a dividend.
Right.
Right. And he was still doing some stuff through dividend, but like the bulk of what he should be getting is through a dividend instead of earned income, and for tax purposes.
Absolutely.
And he just switched his accountant after 20 years. And his accountant was just like, dude, you're going to save like 50 grand a year or more. Like it was a sizable difference. Right. And he's just like, and I've been suggesting to him for a long time, like, dude, you need to
But you
do
have
this.
your CPI. So,
and it's like, and he's, people are creatures of habit or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes to show you along the lines that we're talking about, this stuff adds up quickly. And when you're if you have a business that is making really good revenue and really good profit, you've got the capital to replace stuff that dies or needs to be replaced. You can absorb this a lot better, and it should be industry specific. Like the restaurant and hospitality industry employs significant amount of people, especially people starting out, and you're already hampering them and handcuffing them. like, why is the hospitality industry at that rate? It should be based on your profit, because now the government is now a 25% stakeholder in your business.
Wow.
At certain levels. Like, sure, if we could get our profit up to 10%, we'd make 800 grand, and we'd still be paying the 50 or 60K of it. So now it's a 10% partner, but we can never make that in this industry.
Like,
so
what restaurant?
No,
makes
like
10%?
like McDonald's, but there's land and like whatever.
Yeah.
But they're also doing it on the backs of their employees because they're not paying, as much as some of the other companies are, and all those things. So I don't know. This blindsided me back in 2019. Like, I was livid because, if you are building a business and breaking even, but you still have a payroll, you're basically cutting a check. It's like going to the casino and paying, a VIG, right?
Right.
Or just paying tax, like, for your money.
And
like,
employment taxes have been going up for the last
of
couple
course.
years.
Well, the thing about it is, when
it's
okay,
not even the EHT.
don't even get me going on that, because you've got a minimum. And I'm saying this with the clarification that I support, minimum wages and people that increasing. Like, I support that. But you also had our BC, you had your minimum wage going from $10.50 an hour to now in this summer, it's going to be 17 something. So you then straddle. So back then, in 2018, I think they're like, we're going to get to $15 within 2 years. We're going to then, increase it based on inflation thereafter. And now we're at, I think it's going to 17.25 or something, minimum wage in BC. Great. But we're also, that gets all these people over that line of 500K.
Sure does.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure does.
So now they're getting more tax dollars, right? Because you got to pay more CPP. You got to pay, your portion of employment insurance.
Which all went up.
All goes up because it's a percentage of what you're paying, right? Taxes, they're getting more taxes because now, everybody's, they're taking their 20% or whatever their tax rate is at that level out at a higher number. That's it's more than 50% of where it was 6 years ago, right? So then they're slapping this EHT on, and it was like, come on, man. Yeah. Like, it's a multiple that just is like, why do you get into business? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's no incentive to do good business or to be honest about your books.
Yeah, exactly.
They're encouraging people to
pay people under the table, create a black market, and all those things. So, anyway, so that's our rant about EHT.
Well, yeah,
navigating in the world of higher costs and the food cost issue that is everybody faces. They're facing it at home. We face it as a business, but and pressure for trying to keep prices reasonable.
Because people don't need higher prices from everywhere they turn, and right now it feels everywhere you turn you're getting higher prices on everything, and it's not the restaurants wanting to charge more.
No,
like, we don't want to charge $20 for lunch. You can't
no,
go
but
out.
when your pizza oven dies and you need to spend another $20,000 on a pizza oven, or if your oven goes, or you need to maintain your equipment, you can't be in business without it.
Yeah.
So you're just taking on more debt, which then further prolongs how long you're going to have to work before you can actually make a profit in the business. You're basically just trading dollars, which, it's insane.
It is insane.
And then you're disincentivized to grow your business because the taxes go up as soon as you grow your business. Like, as soon as you add more employees.
Yeah.
Right? If you're at that threshold. I don't know. I just think I don't think it's the wisdom there, when before every single individual was just paying their $80 or $60 or whatever. And people that couldn't afford it was way more straightforward. Yeah. So even if you wanted to split it with business or whatever, that's fine. So there's different ways that they could have done it. I think the restaurant associations or whatever were asking for like $2 million gap, which we still would have fallen into.
Right.
But if you're competing with a burger shop that has 4 employees and you've got a big wheel across the street, I'm paying, 2% more. I'm less competitive than they are for the exact same product.
So here's a question for you. In BC, if you take a McDonald's, who obviously has a higher payroll than any of us. Are they paying this, or is it based on where your headquarters lies?
Well, it depends on the corporate structure. So if it's a franchise, they're a separate corporation, so they'll have their own payroll. But I can't imagine a McDonald's doesn't have
association.
Doesn't matter.
Into this, right?
No, associated companies, it's to do with ownership. So McDonald's doesn't own their franchise.
Okay.
So the franchise is a separate corporation. So that's an arm's length relationship. So there's no cross ownership unless they're partners. Right. So if McDonald's owns 50% and the franchisee, I don't know how that would work, but if that was the case, then there would be an association. So whatever payroll McDonald's, I would trigger it because we have that with Zambrie's and Big Wheel.
Right.
So they're associated company, and same as 2% Sequoia.
Yeah.
You add them both, and if one puts you over, then so it's another way to get you.
Yeah, it was kind of odd that our little Sequoia with one little tiny kiosk was well over $500,000 because it was associated with truffles.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like, so now we have to pay.
You got to pay the
2.5%.
Yeah, exactly.
Payroll.
Which is, I don't know, it's a lot of money. People, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, well, because that's a big. And I guess the math is 30% of your revenue is your labor. So then you're paying 3% on it, 30%. It's like paying 1% on your whole, right? Mm. So it's basically if you're making 5%, now you're making 4% just based on that one tax, right?
And that's just a little add-on tax.
Yeah, just like, don't worry about it, business. Yeah. Like just raise your prices. It's like, bros, this is not how it works. No. Like you just can't do that.
It hurts.
Still hurts. You're still paying it that you didn't have to pay before.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's our rant for today.
Well, let's hope our rants here are heard by people who can do something about it.
Nobody's going to do anything about it. But you know what? It's good to voice it. I think, we talked about some subject matters that may be able to help our listeners and our viewers.
I gave away a book. I gave away Traction again. I've given away a lot of copies. And when you were asking me what's new at the beginning, I was going to say I gave away another copy of Traction.
I love it. I think Traction is an amazing book. If you need help on how to run and organize a business, I think Traction is how to do it.
It's a great
step by step
tool.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it. And we should actually do a book show on business books. I think that would be good.
Can I bring a smutty book in?
No, it's got to be business related.
Okay, I'm still in.
Yeah.
I'll still do it.
Yeah.
What kind of business?
A smutty business book? Jeez.
I don't know.
Business and lingerie? I don't know. We're being inappropriate.
Are we? Time to end it then.
Time to end it.
All right.
Thanks, Sam.
Calen, it's always a pleasure. Happy Wednesday. I hope the rest of the week is awesome.
Remember to be kind.
I will be nice.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Bread and Butter Collective's membership includes the following local businesses: 2% Jazz, Bunny's Kitchen, Buzz Coffee House, Eagle-Ite, Big Wheel Burger, Blue Mountain Solutions, Bodega Tapas Wine Bar, Eva Schnitzel House, Farmsgate Foods and Catering, Victoria Chocolate and Company, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo Asian Street Food, the Culinary Arts Program at Camosun, Cafe Fantastico, Fall Epi, Harold Street Brewworks, Hey Happy, House of Botang, Nikkei Ramen Ya, Jenny Marie's Cracker Company, La Pasta, La Rue Patisserie, Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poco a Pinto Bar, Pizzeria Prima Strada, Keating Pizza, Roast, Table 9 Consulting, Sherwood Cafe and Bar, Sweets by Selena, The Collective Wine Bar and Kitchen, The Drake, Tapa Bar, The Nimble Bar Company, Ruth and Dean, The Whole Beast, The Wienery, Spoon's Diner, Truffles Inspired Catering, and Zambrie's.
To hear more from the Bread and Butter Collective, go to checknews.ca/podcasts on Check Plus, or find us on your favorite podcasting platform.